Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tokyo Living Podcast. I'm here again live in the same location as my guest. Thank you for the feedback on the previous episodes that we've done. It's been a lot of fun to do these sort of live episodes where I actually get to connect with the guest. Those of you watching the video version of this will note that I am in a kitchen, and the reason that I'm in a kitchen is that today's guest is someone that spends a lot of their time in a kitchen. We've got Dan Martin here from Sankaku Nutrition. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam, and thanks for having me in your home.
Perhaps for the listeners and viewers, if you can just give a little bit of background on what you've done professionally and what brought you out to Japan.
Okay, so background on myself, I'm a chef. That's why we stood in the kitchen. I'm also a nutritionist. So I took my undergraduate degree in nutrition back in the UK, where I'm from. In 2000, it was about 2013 I graduated, so it's nearly 10 years ago now. Since then, I created a company back in the UK. It was a kind of a healthy catering company. Okay. We specialised in giving kind of not in-home. I would cook meals in my home and give them to gyms, supermarkets, and so forth. And I also helped semi-professional athletes or bodybuilders or like kind of highland competitors with their nutrition or weight loss goals or something like that. So
that's obviously an interesting combination, being both trained as a nutritionist and a chef. Was that, what sort of came first, and was it always your plan to combine both, I guess, the art and the science of food?
Definitely the love of food came first. When I was younger, I was often kind of left to my own vices at home. My mum would be working, my brother would be studying, and then I kind of got bored of eating whatever my mum had cooked, I guess, or I got a bit kind of inquisitive about what I could do myself. Yeah. So I started kind of cooking from the age, probably from about 9 or 10 years old, I'd start cooking for myself. I don't know how palatable those foods were, but I certainly enjoyed them. Yeah. And then my love of food kind of just went from there. But I also had quite a key interest in science. Okay. And when it came to kind of the time of, I was a bit of a latecomer to education. I mean, I wasn't the best in school, I have to admit. So I didn't go to university till I was 21, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to be a chef, but I wasn't too sure about kind of the hours. And that kind of, I was already working part-time as a chef, and I thought this is quite gruesome. I didn't know if I wanted to do that as a career, and I also kind of really wanted to study science as well. So I was caught in two minds, and it wasn't actually me that came up with the idea, it was a friend. Okay. And it was actually a night out. And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, what do you love? And I said, well, I love food. Yeah, we all know that. And I love science. He says, well, be a nutritionist then. And honestly, it was like a light bulb moment. Yeah. So off I went to university, studied nutrition. After that, again, I didn't want to work in kind of, a lot of nutrition work is based in an office. If you're a dietitian or something, you kind of sat in an office, and it's not really kind of who I am. Sure. I'm always moving around. And so I wasn't sure again what I wanted to do, so I started a catering company. I got a business loan, a small business loan, and I started a catering company just from my kitchen, because it was kind of all the money that I had at the time. Yeah. So I could only use my kitchen, and I used that to just first supply a local gym, and then it kind of went there to a couple of supermarkets in the local area, and it went on for a couple of years, but eventually I couldn't scale up the business. So it's kind of a long story now, but I guess it is a bit of a long story. Yeah. And then from there, I realized the business couldn't grow and it wasn't sustainable. And admittedly, that was about 8 years ago. I was a little bit naive. So I kind of put that to a halt and decided to kind of improve my chefing skills. So since then, I've been kind of traveling around the world, volunteering at places or working in different kitchens, also tied in nicely with my interest in snowboarding. Okay. So I spent a lot, because seasonal work kind of puts you in lots of different places. Yeah. And I thought that was great, because I kind of can travel. I wanted a lot of different kind of weaponry in my ammunition. So that's, if you work in one restaurant, you're going to work on the same menu for 6 months to a year, and only small changes will happen. So I wanted to bounce around and learn from lots of different chefs and lots of different cuisines. Yeah. So I did that, and I landed in Japan. Yeah. I landed in Japan. It was during COVID. The UK kind of shut down. The restaurant I was working at, I was training under really well-regarded chefs. I wanted to stay there, but the future of the restaurant was kind of uncertain. And so some conversations were had, and we decided, I do hold a Japanese passport, because I was actually born here,
Right.
but moved to the UK when I was about 2 years old.
Okay.
I spoke with my mother, who's Japanese, and she said, "Oh, why don't you go to Japan? It's still kind of, from what I understand, it's quite open still, but it's a little bit restricted, but nothing like the UK." So that was it. Came over to Japan, started working in Niseko. I've worked in Hakuba. I met a lovely lady there, who's now my wife. Thank you. And decided that, okay, let's give another company a go. And what can I do? It wasn't really that possible in Hakuba to grow a company, I don't think. So I wanted to come somewhere where there was more English-speaking people, larger community, and that was Tokyo.
Yeah.
So we moved here about a year ago, and now I've set up the company Sankaka Nutrition, which is a nutrition company. And I look to kind of expand that into different areas, but at the moment I'm doing an in-home meal preparation.
And by in-house meal preparation service, you mean that you actually come to the client's residence and do the cooking there for them?
Exactly, just like we're stood here today.
Yeah.
I would formulate a menu, a plan, depending on their food preferences, their health goals, their metabolic health. It could be all sorts of people, busy families, individuals, all sorts. And then I would grocery shop for them, come to the kitchen like your space today, cook up a load of meals, around about 4 days worth. It could be evening meals or depends on their schedule, and leave them all stored in a fridge for them to reheat whenever at their preference.
So what's the whole process behind designing a meal plan? How do you actually go through that with the client?
Yeah, good question. I guess it's a unique business, so that'd be a good thing to answer. So it starts with a conversation. So I'll get a client probably get in contact with me. And it all depends. The questions I ask is kind of where's their metabolic health at the time. Are they looking? Some clients may be looking to be in good metabolic health and just maybe doing some resistance training and hit a plateau and want to kind of get more muscle mass. Or more commonly with me, it's someone that's got some form of metabolic dysfunction. So it could be someone that's pre-diabetic or already in type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, kind of those biomarkers. So it all really depends on each individual. So we'll look at where their health is, and then we'll talk about creating a plan that's going to help them improve their health. I guess the next step from that, if we agree on a plan, I would come to the client's home and we'd kind of get a bit more in-depth knowledge about who they are, family life, work schedules, food preferences. And I'll kind of take all that information into account. I'll create a menu accordingly, propose that menu to the client. They can kind of adjust a few little things here and there if they want to, and then I'll send back the confirmed menu. And then what happens next is I come to their house. They can be in the home or they could be at work. It's all dependent on the client's preference. I would go grocery shopping for everything for the menu. Come into their space just like this, cook up all the menu, all the meals that we've agreed upon, and then clean everything up like as if no one was ever there, and then leave the food, which we'll show later. I brought a meal with me. We'll leave the food in containers in the fridge, labelled, and so they can have food ready for them that they know is good for their metabolic health, and they're on their way to improving their health, and be satisfied knowing that also they're going to save a bunch of time, typically around 9 to 12 hours a week, where you can spend time running around chasing after your kids, if that's someone like yourself or me who both have infants and small toddlers. Or it could be you can use that time to improve your business, use that time to go to the gym. Club 360 is a great place to start. So it all depends how you want to use your time. If that's just having more time with your family, that's great too.
And then from the nutrition side, I mean, how often are you sort of reassessing things like, obviously whatever's specific to the client, whether it's blood markers, whether it's body composition metrics, how often are you sort of reassessing that with the client? I mean, obviously it depends on the person's individual goal.
Yeah, but it depends on, good question, depends on biomarkers as well. For example, some things won't change after 1 week, but some things like cholesterol can change after 2 weeks of good diet. Body mass is also something can change quite rapidly, but that could be kind of glycogen storage. So a lot of that weight could be water. A lot of people don't realize that when we go on some of these fad diets. I'm not going to call the ketogenic fad diets. I think it's got some great therapeutic advantages as well. But just using it as an example, a lot of your stored carbohydrate, glycogen, is going to be completely not wasted, but leaves the body. And that's going to be the weight that you see on the scale. So you think you've lost all this fat, but really you've probably lost a lot of water on that. So anyway, it's a long-winded answer, but it all depends.
Yeah. And for those people that are looking more at body composition goals, are you looking, within what you can realistically do, are you providing macros and total energy intake with the meals, or
Good question again. That's completely dependent. So I cook for some families that are just busy families who aren't really, they're all quite in good metabolic health, and they just want to continue that. So it's also important to realize it's not just, healthy eating isn't just trying to treat something that's already gone wrong.
Sure.
It's a great way to be, preventative is always better than reaction.
Yeah.
So if someone's already maintaining a good healthy diet, I can just keep maintaining that, but then on top of that, they'll get lots of free time.
Yeah.
If someone did want to do something a little bit more specific with macronutrients, especially like bodybuilders or someone who's training or weight loss as well, is important to do that with, and someone was trying to calculate their calories over the day or daily intake or weekly intake, then of course I can provide that. But that's the kind of conversation we have in the initial conversations before we get the service going. Yeah, sure. Good question.
And how often are you sort of changing the menu? Do you sort of switch it up, or
every week? Every week. I do ask if there's any things that they want to repeat, because it can get quite tiring actually if you're eating different food every single day. Sometimes we just want to come home and have that comfort as well. So if there's any ones they really enjoyed in the last few weeks, I always make sure I mention before I create the menu. And then it repeats. I think you tend to get requests, especially if there's children in the family. The children will be the first ones to choose. That's kind of how the hierarchy of power goes in a household. It is all dependent. But the food changes all the time. That's the whole idea of why I travelled so many different places and cooked in so many different kitchens. It's given me a wealth of knowledge of different foods to cook, different ethnicities. It goes anything from Indians. I like to use curries and stuff as well, because you can get lots of different spices and herbs in there, and it also, the kind of acidity in there maintains the food. So on the fourth day, the curries are really good because they still keep really well. Indian, Japanese, it really doesn't matter.
So as a nutritionist, what do you regard as some of the most important concepts around healthy eating?
I think there's some really quite key and quite easy to place pillars in nutrition that I'd love to kind of share with you today. And interestingly, the first things I'd probably talk about aren't actually foods themselves. So first is to have a well-balanced diet, and to maintain that we need adherence. You have to be able to follow it. And to kind of highlight that example, I'd love to start with a statistic, which is lots of research shows that 80% of people that initially started a weight loss program or a diet, after 1 year, they can't maintain that weight loss. And after 2 years, up to 50%, I think the number is, you can actually expect them to increase, so gain more weight than they originally lost. And that's because we give up, and then we cave in, we feel bad about ourselves, and then we just go down the wrong path again. And I think that's a lot to do with things that we can't adhere to. So a lot of these diets, they're good. Maybe we lose some weight in the first 8 to 12 weeks because they put you on the 800 calorie diet and so. But our bodies have loads of compensatory mechanisms, because if you think about it in like a survival instinct way, if we're losing, our body's thinking, oh God, the next meal going to come. So when the next meal does come, we try and store as much as we can. We get increase in hunger happens. So it's a drive to kill, I guess back in the day would be like a drive to hunt. And that now the hunting's not so hard. It's just go to the supermarket or go to your local fast food restaurant and you can get your meal. So adherence is really important. Include foods that you love still. It's like so many diets are so restrictive nowadays. I mean, the food that I cook for the families, I try and make that as healthy as possible. But outside of that, it's fine to include other foods. For me, I like a bit of ice cream here and there. I think I contracted that from my wife meeting her. For example, something that you might like, a chocolate or something, I don't know. Doesn't mean that has to go out the window. So it's about including everything into a whole kind of big picture. I like around about 80% of your meals are looking at the pillars that I'm going to talk about, and then the rest of it kind of still eat the stuff that you like as well.
And then moving on from that. So
the next thing, again, not a food group, sleep. I want to talk about sleep first, because if we get everything else right metabolically, like in our diet, and we get our sleep wrong, it's almost no point. And kind of statistics and research that shows that is that even just after 1 night of sleep deprivation or disrupted sleep, we can have a drastically changed insulin response. So basically we become insulin resistant. So just after 1 night sleep deprivation, studies have shown that our insulin resistance can be similar to that of a type 2 diabetic in a completely normal, healthy person, which is crazy. I mean, that can be restored, after one night good sleep, which that's the good news. But if that's a continuous kind of process, over a year or 2 years or 3 years, then that's really going to kind of come out at the other end as some form of metabolic dysfunction, which also ties into, it's kind of a double-edged sword, is that we don't get enough sleep, so our insulin response is worsened, but also we have an increase in hunger, a hunger hormone called ghrelin, and also a decrease in the satiety hormone called leptin. And so we wake up, we seek highly palatable foods, high calorie dense foods, and then we have a altered insulin response to those foods as well, which then we then have high glucose, high blood sugar maintained for a long period of time, which is what we don't want, and all sorts. And that's just a small part of why sleep can affect your metabolic health. There's also fat oxidation and stuff, and we could be here all day, but really it's important to highlight sleep.
Yeah, I think everyone sort of understands that when you've had a couple of, or even just one night of poor sleep, you tend to be hungry. And we went through, a few bad weeks with our younger son waking up a lot, and we also, everyone in the family had colds, and I just felt that I was, constantly a lot hungrier than I usually am.
Definitely, and so everyone knows at home, that's not your fault. Just if we can be aware of the knowledge, and then we can be intuitive, go, okay, that's not just me being, lazy or whatever. It's a body's response. So we can, if we take that knowledge of knowing that's our response, and then we can go, okay, instead of this morning, I'm craving pancakes, but if you know that's going to have quite a bad response metabolically, just kind of get some willpower and go, okay, I'm going to have something more kind of fat and protein based for breakfast, and that's going to kind of help your insulin levels and your glucose levels throughout the day. I mean, especially in the morning, because once you've gone, if you have like a high carbohydrate meal, after that kind of the insulin response is kind of weakened, then it's going to set you off to be going like a roller coaster up and down all day, like kind of blood sugar spikes and then low valleys. So it's really important. I think in saying that, what's the best way to get a good night's sleep? Routine. A routine that I've adopted, is quite popular right now, is the 10-3-2-1-0 method. So no caffeine 10 hours before sleep. Caffeine actually has quite a long half-life, which is how much, so if you have a coffee maybe 6 hours before bed, you might still get to sleep and say, I'm fine, I'm a fast metabolizer of caffeine, but it's still going to affect how deep you go into your sleep, and we're looking at sleep quality too. 3 stands for no food or kind of even drinks, such as alcohol, calories that are contained in drinks, 3 hours before bed. We have a thermic effect of food, especially protein. So our bodies heat up, could be trying to digest all the food, and then our bodies actually need to drop by like 0.2 or 5 degrees to go into deep sleep. So if we're digesting food, it's going to kind of be fighting against each other, and then it's going to affect how well we sleep or how quickly we get to sleep. 2 is no work before 2 hours before sleep, which is really difficult nowadays because we're all got our phones and emails and so forth. But that's going to, if you work in a typically stressful environment, which work often is, your cortisol is going to raise, and we don't want that just before sleep and so forth. 1 hour before sleep, no blue light, no bright lights and stuff. So I try and dim the lights or go into just go into complete darkness and maybe just listen to a podcast or something like that. And then 0 is 0 minutes of snooze in the morning, which is very difficult. I've managed to do it, but it took me a while, to be honest. But the benefits are instant. So a good night's sleep actually starts the morning or even the day before. But the good night's sleep starts in the morning. So we get up, get out, get some bright light. There's a professor called Andrew Huberman, who's quite popular and blown up all over the web now, but he's doing some really good research. And he says, get up, get some bright light, get some sunlight into your eyes in the first hour, get out, go for a walk. It really helps set that circadian rhythm, your body clock, to get you a good night's sleep. So they're my tips.
Things like routine and sleep, obviously massively important for everything that we do in terms of healthy habits with exercise, pain management and sports performance. Where would you go next in terms of that hierarchy?
Okay, so let's start with food. Food groups, macronutrients. Highest on my hierarchy, personally, protein. Something that a lot of us don't get enough of. Just for a short example, protein is a short description. Protein is the kind of building blocks of life. We need it for cell repair, cell maintenance, muscle repair, and so forth. A lot of us aren't getting enough proteins. Why is protein important, I guess you would probably ask? Well, protein is important because it builds our muscles, and having a large amount of muscle mass is really beneficial for us. When we talked about earlier about blood glucose, and we didn't go into too much depth, and maybe we could do that another day, but what muscle does, it's kind of like acts like a big sink. So when we do have those sugar spikes, or even just some sugar spikes, muscle, once kind of activated, really just pulls all that blood sugar in. Helps us kind of maintain a steady blood sugar. The more muscle you have, the more it's going to pull in. Also, the more muscle you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate will be, because muscles are really metabolically demanding tissue. And if you look at the studies, you did a video recently on grip strength and longevity of life, and that kind of ties in with muscle mass as well, lean muscle mass. So lean muscle mass also is a really good predictor of how long, and also the quality of life you will have. So it's not just longevity or lifespan, I also like health span. So you can be 70, but you could be on all sorts of medications and, creeping down the stairs or have one of those, But if you're 70, you've got, still got a large amount of muscle mass on your lean muscle mass. You're still very active. You're walking around. You still be playing sports and stuff like that. So it's really important that we prioritize muscle and protein intake. You can be resistant to training, but you want to be hitting the protein intake. So that's kind of my first tip would be to increase your protein intake. Also, I didn't mention, it's the most satiating of the macronutrients. Sure. So by that means, if you have some high protein meal, it's going to keep you fuller for longer. Yeah. So we're not going back into the cupboard and snacking again, and it kind of maintains that energy level throughout the day. Yeah. So definitely a high protein intake, resistance training. If that's not your thing, then find something that's quite similar or something that you love, because the most important thing with exercise is you enjoy it, and adherence again. You need to be able to find an activity that lasts a lifetime. Yeah. But for me, if you can, I think resistance training is great. Join a gym, for example, your gym, Color 360, and I'm sure you've seen people vastly improve their health through resistance training.
Protein's massively important. If you sort of then looking at specific targets, I know in terms of like sports performance and building muscle mass or retaining muscle mass when on a diet, the typical sort of range that I think a lot of people would hear about is around 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. What do you think about those sort of recommendations?
Yeah, they're the numbers that are getting thrown around right now. So there's quite good research on this. Protein's become a really heavily focused area. Typically, I think a lot of people, especially some of my clients, I've got to have a bit of an ear to the ground at the moment. I spoke to lots of different people, and some people are quite scared by that. The 1.6 to 2 grams seems quite like a large amount. When you put that in front of you, it is quite a large amount of protein to be taken with people that don't, especially vegetarians or people that don't specifically like eating large amounts of meat. So 1.6 is kind of the sweet number. So between 1.6 and 2, there's not much difference, but if you are someone that's really active or, resistance training 3 or 4 times a week and really wants to put on lots of bodybuilders and so forth, there is some marginal kind of enhancement there between 1.6 and 2, maybe even bigger, but really 1.6 is a sweet number. And then I think that one gram per kilogram per body weight per day is also, if you can just achieve that, that's great. Let's not just get scared away by the big number. And then you can slowly, once you get used to that, slowly increase. You get used to it. I think a lot of it is like pressured now. You've got to be having 2 grams out, you're failing, but you're not. 1 gram, I think the recommendation from lots of governing bodies, they differ all over the world, but it's around 0.8. But towards a gram, 0.8 is fine as well. If some days, if that's what it is, that's what it is. But focus on it. Be aware of it. But 1.6 especially, and then the 2 grams, especially in people of older age, because there's a thing called muscle sarcopenia, which is kind of the degradation of muscle. So as you get older, around about in your 40s and over, you start losing muscle mass. Your body just starts depleting it. So if you want to be maintaining that muscle mass, then you definitely want to be hitting what kind of 1.6 to 2 is going to be beneficial for you, because you want to keep your muscle, as explained earlier, is a really healthy metabolic kind of tissue.
I think, the more you try to lose weight, if you're on a calorie deficit, obviously, resistance training is really important there to maintain that muscle mass.
Exactly. That's another way. That's a great example, Sam. Yeah. So when you're in a calorie deficit, that's a really important area to focus on as well. It's because protein is actually also an energy source. It's not preferred energy source by the body, but when carbohydrates and fats are depleted, if you're in a calorie deficit, probably are. Then it's going to start looking into where else can I get a bit of energy, and unfortunately that's your muscle, and you don't really want to be losing muscle. So if you're on a calorie deficit, 1.6 to 2 grams is great, but 1.6 is fine. From the large meta-analysis studies have shown 1.6 is okay. You're not going to be chewing in through too much muscle if you're hitting 1.6 and in a calorie deficit, in my opinion.
Obviously, we could talk about protein for days on end. Is there any other sort of parts of your sort of general healthy eating guidelines?
100%. Yeah. So protein, probably top of the hierarchy, but they're all pretty level. After that, I'd love to talk about fiber. Fiber is kind of used to be not sexy at all. Kind of your grandma would stir it into a drink so she can have a bowel movement or something. That's kind of, I think doctors used to term it like roughage.
Right.
But those things still stand, still helps you make a bowel movement, but the new science is amazing, and it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's really it's going to open new doors for health. So fiber, first we probably should say that there's two types of fiber. Insoluble, it means you can't mix it with water, and then another one called soluble fiber, which when mixed with water kind of makes this like gloopy. Have you ever used chia seeds before?
Yes, I have, yes.
Yeah, and when you mix that with some water, it makes that kind of gloopy substance. That's the soluble fiber.
Okay.
So soluble fiber is really good for our gut health as well. When we ingest it, we have all these little bacteria in our bodies. Believe it or not, we are not alone. We have things called our microbiome. So microbiota, individually they make up our microbiome, and they're kind of concentrated in our gut. And what happens when we eat soluble fiber? These little bacteria come along, and we can't. So fiber, I should say, that is a carbohydrate to start with, but our bodies don't have the enzymes to digest them, but these little bacteria do. And there's millions and trillions. There's trillions of them in our body, and they come along and they feed on this soluble fiber, and in return, almost like a symbiotic relationship, they give out these powerful metabolites called, specifically, butyrate. And what butyrate does, it's really anti-inflammatory, it heals our gut lining, it helps prevent something called leaky gut, which is basically, you think about your intestines, a lot of that stuff you don't want in your bloodstream, and that's why there's an intestinal lining, the epithelial lining there. And sometimes that, from inflammation, from a poor diet, our stuff in our intestines can get into our bloodstream, and that spells havoc. And what the butyrate does, it's a short chain fatty acid. It kind of repairs that and maintains it as well, and protects us from getting a leaky gut. But also people with large amounts of butyrate in their bodies have shown to have better body composition, better insulin sensitivity, all sorts of different metabolic ways. And that science is getting like wider and wider, and we really don't know how far it goes, but it's huge. So fiber's sexy.
Yes. but I think often not talked about enough as things like protein.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've gone through protein and fiber. I'm assuming that there's fats and carbs are going to be talked about a little bit as well.
So carbohydrates, let's go carbohydrates. Another widely debated topic. In my opinion, should include them in your diet. There is therapeutic kind of reasons for a ketogenic diet, which is where you remove carbohydrates from your diet. I don't want to go into that today. I'm not against it, but I think for adherence, for the population-wise, I think including carbohydrates, because we all love pasta and bread and stuff and so forth. You don't want to take them out of your diet. Carbohydrates are important. But the main thing with carbohydrates is trying not to ingest them on their own, kind of called naked carbohydrates, is a kind of term that's thrown around now, and I quite like that. To kind of put food on your carbs. Put clothes on your carbs. And that clothes is fiber, protein, fats. That's going to slow the absorption of the carbohydrates, and stopping, again, we talk about the big peaks in blood glucose, and then after that we have big drops, and that's going to cause mood swings, increased hunger, and then actually it's going to cause inflammation, which eventually leads to all sorts of chronic diseases. So look, when we talk about carbohydrates, always try and involve fats, proteins, or fiber.
And I think anecdotally for me, who, I do have some sort of digestive issues, if I eat carbohydrates alone, like if I snack and I just have, say, a piece of fruit, I feel a little bit bloated afterwards. But if I have that with some protein, with some yogurt, with some fat, I just feel like it's got more of a calming effect on my digestion.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. If you're a bit intuitive and if you just stop for a day and just kind of monitor how you feel, and a lot of us just go kind of so used to our daily lives that we're kind of going like a racehorse. But if you stop and just think about how you kind of felt after that meal, and then change it up next day, and then seeing the difference, you'll see a very quick response. And just in your thoughts, cognitive function, your brain fog, everything, mood, all sorts.
And then fats. What are your thoughts on
fats? So fats, another widely debated topic. My personal opinion, what I try and do is, fats are essential. But, they're demonized too, but they are actually essentials. In some fats we can't even create in the body. There's no essential carbohydrate, so our bodies can create carbohydrates, but we can't create fats. Some certain fats, specifically omega-3s, polyunsaturated fats. So oily fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines. Try and go down lower the food chain, because the higher the food chain you go, you'll find more deposits of mercury. So what we don't want. So one piece of healthy fish a week is kind of a sweet number. And then other fats, monounsaturated, so from olive oils. Yep. Olive oils is my preferred fat when I'm cooking. Full of polyphenols. We'll talk about polyphenols maybe another day. Yep. Also really great for our health. And then also saturated fats aren't bad either. Include them in your diet. You find them on meats typically. I love saturated fats in dairy, so like Greek yogurt is great. You'll also find saturated fats in stuff like coconut milk, so that's the kind of plant-based saturated fats you'll find, but mainly predominantly you're going to find them in meats. But we shouldn't be scared of them. There's a lot of misinterpretation in the science. About 50 years ago, that stuck for a very long time. The thing with nutrition is once you label something, it takes almost a couple of generations to change that around. But yeah, saturated fats are fine, but predominantly look for mono and polyunsaturated fats in your diet.
So if someone has some basic knowledge of nutrition and decent cooking skills, where would someone like you come into it, and how would someone benefit from a personalized meal plan?
Many ways. So a lot of the time, say if we're going to the supermarket and stuff, it's very difficult to individualize a meal that's kind of a ready meal or something that you've bought from the supermarket for yourself. And as we spoke about, nutrition is really individual. So even one person, depends on where they are in the health journey, is going to, like macronutrient and like nutrition demand is going to be constantly changing. So I kind of come in there and keep an eye on it whilst, we can be focused on work or family life. With the right education, someone can do it, but it's almost a job in itself, unfortunately. Luckily, there's things like CGMs that are coming out, continuous glucose monitor. I think you spoke with Dr. Tom Lomax about, really interesting stuff. There's other stuff that's going to come up on apps where you can kind of monitor all your stuff. But at the moment, it's still quite laborious. And I kind of come in there and then I would individualize each meal and track your progress as you go along. So you can kind of be satisfied in knowing that someone's looking after you.
So we've actually got an example of the type of meal that you might prepare. Dan, if you could just sort of run through what you've got there.
So this is typically what you'd find with an individual customer. Obviously, as spoken about before, it varies, but this is kind of covers all the pillars of a healthy diet, I'd say, in one meal. So first we have, at the top, we have some sous vide chicken. Sous vide is a fancy French word for under vacuum. So basically we vacuum the chicken, and then we cook it at low temperature in water, so water bath. And that kind of locks in the nutrients and locks in the kind of tenderness of the chicken without losing too many nutrients and also keeping it nice and moist. Surrounding that, you'll see some lovely vegetables, also cooked sous vide, locking in that nutrition again. Underneath there, you can't quite see it. We talked about fibre earlier. We've got some puy lentils there. The fancy French term for cooking these lentils this way is lentils à la française, but that kind of just translates to just lentils sautéed with carrots, onions and celery and some herbs, so like bay leaf, thyme. And underneath there, what I would typically use in a professional kitchen, I would have made like a celeriac puree or potato puree with lots of butter and cream. But as we're trying to maintain a healthy diet, I've used a turnip. instead. And there's just a tiny, about 5 grams of butter in there to still get that kind of velvety texture, but it kind of locks in there and it kind of acts as a sauce for everything else. So you can kind of put everything together in one fork and have a nice tasty morsel.
So some fantastic information there, Dan, and it was great seeing a sample of the type of food that you make. If people are interested in your services or just want to find out a little bit more about you, where could they do so? Do you have a website? Are you active on social?
Yeah, I'm active as I possibly can be at the moment. So yeah, I have a website.
Yep.
So www.sankakunutrition.com. I'll probably leave it in the comments something below.
Yep.
And I also have an Instagram page, same name, Sankaku Nutrition. Same name on Facebook too.
Okay.
And also, I must say that the in-home meal preparation itself is kind of, we're branching out a little bit as we kind of look to do different things in nutrition around Tokyo. So the in-home meal preparation itself is going to be called BioChef, which I plan to launch the page, I think, later tonight once I get home.
Okay.
So there will also probably be a link for that as well, hopefully.
Yeah. And what are some of the other things that you've got in store for the business?
The next thing I'm looking to do is cooking classes. I mean, my in-home meal preparation only allows me to service a minute amount of people a week, and I want to try and help as many people as I can. So cooking class is a great way to get 12, 15 people in one room. So I'm hoping to set up a cooking class, regular cooking class, where we'll talk about the basics of nutrition and then how to kind of put that towards, cooking your own food or cooking your family's food, and try and educate everyone just a little bit, step by step. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on today. It was great finding out a little bit more about you, about your background, how you've sort of used that in what you're doing with the business, which I think is fantastic. It was great just to hear some of your basic thoughts on nutrition. You've alluded to a few other topics that we could go into in a bit of depth in a future episode. So I think it'd be great to get you back on in the future and delve into a little bit more depth with some of those topics. So if you're watching out there and you do have some topics that you would like Dan to speak about, please let us know in the comments or DM me. Thank you very much for watching. Check out Dan on his socials, check out his website, and if you are interested in utilising his services, please get in contact with him. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.